Mexico is not in full control of their own country. So when he says that he might have to deal with the gangs, i.e. like General Pershing and George Patton and people went in 1916, they went into Mexico to stop Villa and banditry that had come across the border and killed Americans. They weren't very successful. It was very hard to find them. So I guess what he's saying is if you just rethink our relations and don't have any preconceptions and just say this is A country, this is B country, and they send in Chinese raw product fentanyl, have special cartel factories that process it into drugs that are disguised as methamphetamines, whatever, but laced with fentanyl. And out of that, 75 to 100,000 Americans die per year. And over 10 years, it's more than all of the American deaths and all of our wars in history. Then they're an enemy because they knowingly do it. And that gives them some $20 billion into the economy. And then you also say that Mr. Obrador, remember he said, isn't it beautiful? 40 million people went into the United States from Mexico, meaning illegally. And then he said, the Mexican prior president, Obrador, said he wanted all expatriate Mexican Americans to vote against Republicans, and especially Trump. And then Mexico gets China around tariffs by having China send in computer parts, manufactured parts, car parts, and then they just assemble them and come in under NAFTA, and they're running a $178 billion surplus with the United States. That is on top of $63 billion that expatriate Mexican nationalists, the majority of them here residing illegally and on some sort of health, housing, education, nutritional support from local, state, and federal governments. And that's $63 billion. You add the $63 billion with a $20 billion cartel profit, and then you add the $180 billion, and you're getting close to, I don't know, $270 billion that's coming out of the United States. And you would think that that would give us a little leverage, especially when they've destroyed our border. And every time we try to suggest something to them, they stonewall us or they threaten us or something. And they're very upset. I mean, if you think that this is a racial or ethnic issue, it's not. When Donald Trump got 46% of the Hispanic vote, most of it Mexican-American vote. So what I'm getting at is he's trying to think out of the box and tell Mexico it's not going to continue any longer. You're not going to kill American youth and let these gangs come into our country. That is a legitimate. We had a community, Mendota, not very far from where I lived. It was taken over by M13, by Mexican gang. Taken over. They had to get FBI SWAT teams to come in. On my avenue, about 2 years ago, there was a shootout between Norteños, Sureños people. One day I was driving into town and there was about 15 law enforcement cars. Most of the law enforcement people had bulletproof vests on, but they were in civilian clothes with the little insignia on the back, of their various agencies. And they had maybe 10 people stripped down to their boxer shorts, handcuffed, sitting on the side of the road waiting for it to be processed. Right? I'd say it's a half mile from where I live. So it's everywhere. Gangs from Mexico here running and so it has to stop. And when Hexas says there's basically everything is possible, I don't know what that would mean, but we've never, since 1916, really gone into Mexico territory without their permission. And maybe they would give us their permission because they're terrified of the gangs themselves. And one of the things that happened in Art of the Deal style, he's been talking about this for a long time, both before he was nominated as secretary and afterwards. And now we find out that Mexico is allowed to extradite, 20-something gang members that were killers, including murders of American citizens. Yeah, and they wouldn't let us try them here in the United States. And now they are. So they're trying to think of ways. There was another news story this week that Mexico suggested that maybe if the United States would invest money in it, they would be weaned off China, and then they would allow American companies to assemble products and not Chinese, and they wouldn't try to avoid the tariffs that China should pay. So they are thinking of ways. I mean, they're not quite like the loony Canadian foreign ministers I said last episode, where she was on record of saying the French and the British should give us a nuclear deterrent to use against the United States. Mexico is not in full control of their own country. So when he said